eyes with a paper towel and then ran it over her neck. She was sweating and shaking and crying all at once. She leaned over the edge of the kitchen sink with her elbows and ran lukewarm water over the underside of her wrist. Eula Lee, that was the boy's mother's name. Tina stood with her when the drag boat turned hers, idled away, out of sight, then finally out of sound. Eula Lee insisted Tina and the deputy come inside for a glass of sweet tea, and they sat at the kitchen table, the oilcloth pattern long faded from sun and scrubbing. Outside, Robbie, now the man of the house, by default, knocked a log of firewood against a tree again and again, the echo rushing over the still water back. Cole crouched on the porch, his T-shirt stretched over his knees like a tent and his hat pulled low. Inside the cabin was spare but immaculate, open shelves and walls covered with the trappings of men. They'll do an autopsy, see why he died. The deputy took a pull on his tea. After, you and I should take him over to Pete, over with Pete. Eula Lee nodded. A strand of hair loose from her ponytail bounced on her jaw. She swept it behind her ear and stood. At the door, she looked down at Cole. Just the two, she said. There won't be more. At the boat ramp, Tina asked about Pete. Her husband. Cancer got him a few months back. Not the first young'un she's lost either. How many? You know, girl, I lost count. Tina thought the whole capture your soul with a camera thing was some weird third world myth conjured up by Westerners who tramped through the jungles and deserts in search of knowledge or wealth. A hat trick, no different from her grandpa's lame slapstick game of got your nose. The voodoo priestess she followed for a week for a photo essay checked her lipstick in the shine of a silver bracelet before allowing Tina a shot. Even she told Tina the Bayou families would be afraid. The camera is bad magic, she said. Then she asked for prints for free. The families were camera shy, Tina learned, but it wasn't the camera. It was the stranger behind the camera, the outsider. No different than the Kentucky farm family she shot in college or the Cheyenne she met one summer. Superstition was the myth. They had no call to fear boogeymen or the voodoo chants. They saw for themselves what the Bayou could dish up. Tina pulled up the photo index on her computer. The Brissette file opened to the photos of the search for Paul. What she'd hoped were discrete shots of the family in crisis. She scrolled until she found what she was looking for, a family portrait shot the year before. Eula Lee stood with Pete on the porch, his arm around her waist, the boys seated in front with scrubbed faces and slicked down hair. Their hands were still. For a change, Eula Lee had moved. Tina hit print. Jason smiled at her from a silver frame, their wedding. Too precious, too soon? She picked up a rustic cypress frame with a photo from their housewarming, the two of them. A bottle of champagne at the doorway. She hugged it to her chest. The boys walked by the porch, zucchini poking out of their basket like bread loaves. Wait, she rapped on the porch door. Don't go yet. She swapped the portrait for the wedding photo in its frame and spit polished it with the hem of her T-shirt. The mirror of silver, her own face repeated in the doubled edge. Cole sat in the boat, his hand wrapped around the dock-pleated bow line. For your mama. Tina handed the framed photo to Robbie. Cole scrambled to look at it. I want to see. The boat rocked. Careful, Cole, Robbie said. He ran a finger over the glass and pulled off his hat, then his shirt, spreading it across the bench beside him. He wrapped the picture in his shirt and placed it under the middle seat. His eyes met Tina's. He nodded. Cole pulled in the bow line and Robbie swung the boat toward home. The reflection of the cypress wobbled in their wake. Tina dumped the water from the motor cover and set it in her truck bed. When Mary Jo came down, she'd asked for help loading the motor into her truck. As the water stilled, the nutria paddled back and settled in under the dock.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
So it's time for you guys to talk. Have any questions about anything? The roads between here and Chicago? That's,
In my class at Heuring, you talked about the image of the wheelchair.
oh, yes.
You made that the end of the story and then had to build a story up to it. That's interesting to me. Was it different in any way, or is that just the way you construct a story all the time?
It was different for me. I don't usually start with the end of the story. But what had happened is that a friend and I were walking along the Savannah River, and we saw something in the river, and we couldn't believe it. We're looking at each other. Is that a wheelchair? Is that really a wheelchair? Maybe it's a bicycle. It's a wheelchair. And so she was always telling me, she was a novelist, she was always telling me, put that in a story. You have to put that in a story. So I put it in a story, but it's the end of the story, not the beginning. And so I've started thinking about this. Who would throw a wheelchair in the river? And was it thrown in there? Was it flooded? I mean, how did it get there? And so I created a story because the character then came to me. Who would put that in there? And so the ending of the story is the wheelchair spinning. And you're still not positive how it got there, but you got a pretty darn good idea. So, but it is different to write that way, right? And have the end.
I'll have to try it.
Yeah. Well, when I try to make something happen that I think is going to be in the story, my characters will just say, "You think you know what's going on?" No. The characters decide a lot of the time what's happening in my stories. And if I don't let them, if I don't follow the character that I created, then the story doesn't make any sense. It seems forced or false. And so I just have to let the characters go where they live.
How separate are your characters from you?
I'm part of all of them, I think. You know, the guy at the resort, I mean, everybody has, I think I take my insecurities into my stories. I take my background into my stories. I have one story in here we talked about a little bit earlier. Sorry, some people were in earlier classes, so they have to hear my stories twice. But there's a story that's more autobiographical than any of them in here. And I can't read it out loud. It makes me cry. And so it's my family goes, "Oh yeah, that story that you wrote about David's dad." It's like, oh, do you have to tell everybody that? But my father-in-law came to live with us when he was not well. And so the story is about this man living. It's told from the point of view of the daughter-in-law, which is also hard for me to do because usually if it's anything personal, I have to give it to a totally different character. But that's not how I wrote this one because that's not how it felt. So I wrote this story, and she is much better than I was. So I made her better. I guess if you can make yourself better in a story, it helps. But it was a very stressful and emotional experience, and consequently, I can't read it.
Yeah. I was just asking because I was talking to Lee earlier. I've never tried to write fiction. I'm amazed by anybody who can do it. I've never even had the nerve to try it. But I've heard other people say this, that the characters take over.
Yeah.
As if they may be a part of you, but they have a different will also.
Yeah.
It's not... I don't even know if I have a question. I just think that's fascinating.
But that's what they do. I mean, I hear their voices, and I do a lot on voice. I like to write dialogue, so I hear them talking. And so when they're talking, their response that they make to somebody else sometimes tells me where the story goes, the next little bit. And I also, when I revise every day, I read aloud what I had written the day before, which is why I'm not always, it's too much work to read all of it. But what happens is that, as they're talking, then the next thing happens, or the next thing happens because of the conversation, and that you just imagine that conversation moving on, and how would they reply when this person said that. And I think that's a lot of ways how they take over, and how they tell the story, because you're hearing them talk, and they're making the responses that they would make, and then the story goes from there. So Anybody else? Well, I thank you all for coming to listen to me read. I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.